Well, welcome back to another episode of Parker's Pensées. This is a podcast where we explore thoughts in philosophy, theology, nature, and life. I love thinking about cool stuff, so come think with me. Today, I have a special guest. This is a returning guest, and I believe he was my first guest I ever had on the podcast, so this is going to be huge. First time, well, his name's Jim Slagle, Dr. Jim Slagle. First time we talked about his book, The Epistemological Skyhook, which is a hardcover book. And it was crazy expensive, but now it's softcover, so everyone can go buy that today. I recommend it. It's a fantastic book. But today we're going to be talking about Dr. Slagle's new book, The Evolutionary Argument Against Naturalism, the context, exposition, and repercussions. And this is an exposition of one of his chapters in the Epistemological Skyhook, and it's focusing in on Plantinga's EAAN. I hate to say it because it sounds terrible, but I don't know what else to call it. His evolutionary argument against naturalism. So without further ado, Jim, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited about this book. I read most of it, and some sections I had to skim, but so good, man.
It hasn't actually been released yet, so
yeah,
you got your pre-copy.
That's right. That's right. I'm super special, man. It makes me feel great. What? When's the release date? Do you know?
I think it's July 13th or 15th or something like that.
Okay, so
it's on Amazon.com. It's on Bloomsbury's website, so you can look up when it's, and you can pre-order it.
Yeah, you can pre-order. Okay,
yeah.
Okay, sweet. Real quick, let's reprisonate just a tiny bit of our last conversation with skyhooks. So this is an unfolded chapter from the epistemological skyhook. Can you help us out? What is an epistemological skyhook?
The broadest definition I would use would be it's any position or anything like that that posits a closed circle, but can only be defined or defended or known or understood from a standpoint transcending that circle.
Yeah.
And the two main foci were determinism and naturalism. The claim is that determinism is positing a closed system where everything is determined, but it can only be defended if we reject determinism, supposedly. And the same with naturalism, that if naturalism is true, then nature is a closed system, but then we can't, don't have a basis for affirming naturalism. And so it's a skyhook because the outside point from which you're defending it is like the sky relative to the system, and it's has to get hooked onto the system itself in order for it to make sense. So they end up being self-defeating.
Yeah,
they're positing a closed system, but can only be known if that system is not closed.
Yes, I love that.
And I got the phrase from Daniel Dennett, who got it, I think, from Richard Rorty. So it's not original to me at all. Calling it the epistemological skyhook is new to me.
Right. And I didn't know that. I don't know if I knew it came from Rorty originally, but I every time I see a crane, I think of you because I think cranes and skyhooks and and so Dennett wants to build from the ground up, but the problem is he has to presuppose a skyhook that doesn't come from the ground up, just like you said. And I love what you did. And this is, again, we mentioned it last time, but you're creative, and this is another reason I like you. But you took this word that he used for ill, and you just said, fine, that's our new position now. I'm going to beat you over the head with it. I'll take that term, skyhook, and let's go with it. Yeah. So I love that.
Well, I say right at the beginning, it's like often the best way to treat, I probably say always, and I shouldn't say always, but a lot of times the best way to treat a word that's being used to try to delegitimize or slur or something like that is just to adopt it and use it to refer to yourself. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, my wife gets crazy angry every time I tell people I'm a Bible thumping Jesus freak, Yeah. But it's like I'm not offended by it. So go ahead.
Yeah. I love that, man. So real quick, what's the first skyhook that you came across? Was it Lewis's Miracles?
Yeah, C.S. Lewis, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how I got onto him, but I was basically I spent 4 years of my life trying to refute Christianity. And somewhere along the line, someone suggested I read C.S. Lewis, and I encountered his argument there, and I was like, oh, crud. And so I kind of got into philosophy, and in a sense, I was trying to, when I say this at the beginning of the epistemological skyhook, I've been trying to refute that argument for like 25 years, and I failed miserably. I cannot do it. I can't refute the argument.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not particular versions of the argument, but the overall idea behind there is like, I can't get around it.
Yeah. Well, Jim, I think that's probably part of the reason why you're not ashamed of being called a Bible thumping wingnut or anything like that, Jesus freak, because yeah, you came in like begrudgingly, like you weren't, and you're here because it's the truth, you know, you were, and so you're like, yeah, this is what's up. Some of us who grew up in the faith are a little bit more, you know, I'm not that I'm judging anybody, but you're just like, hey, I can't say it's wrong, it's right, and so this is what I'll call myself. I love that.
Yeah, I should point out that I'm also extremely insecure about pretty much everything. So saying that, this is true, it's absolutely true, and I'm not absolutely certain that I exist, for example.
Okay, well, I was going to ask you that earlier or later. Let's get into that one too.
Okay.
So Jim, so you're the Plantingian skyhook, the evolutionary argument against naturalism, is one of the skyhooks in your book, and so then you expanded this out to its own book. Mm-hmm. Do you have plans to do this with other chapters?
I've been thinking about doing it with Karl Popper's arguments, because he's got at least 3 distinct arguments, mm-hmm. and skyhook arguments, and I'm thinking about them. I'm partially because I'm not sure if his ultimately are going to be convincing. I mean, his first one is directed at scientific determinism, and he says scientific determinism isn't self-defeating; it's self-refuting. It entails a logical contradiction.
And that's strong.
So that's a strong claim, and I need to dig into that. I'd love to get into that. Then he has just a general claim. He has of clocks and clouds. He has an essay that goes into a general idea here and explaining it. But then in other works, he expresses the same idea within the context of he has 3 worlds and 4 functions of language.
That's right.
And he goes into those, and in that context, he presents another skyhook against determinism. So he's got 3 different versions. The third one is the one I'm least confident about, but that's maybe because I haven't dug into it yet. But I think it's because it seems easy to just say, well, I deny that there's the 3 worlds and the 4 functions of language. I just reject that.
Yeah.
So I'm not as confident that his will be successful. Okay. But I'd like to.
Yeah, that's Popper. I think that's Popper function in the skyhook, right? Is that the name of the chapter? That's so good. Jim, I forgot to send you my thesis. Not that you'd care or anything like that, but I need to do that.
Theses.
Yeah, my bad, man. Because I used your skyhook against theological determinism, and you only mention it on like a page at the end of the book, but the page messed with me pretty good, and so I developed a 115 page response to just that. So it was fun, man. It made me think really good. So I'll send that your way. But let's jump in to the Plantingian skyhook, the EAAN, as I'm loath to call it, but I have to. I said Plantingian too, because that's what everybody else says. But why isn't Plantingian? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Why? I don't know. You have to be understandable, so you have to use the crazy people's language.
Yeah,
I don't understand why.
Yeah, I meant more like calling it EAAN is what I loathe, because it sounds so weird. But I feel you on the Plantingian as well.
How would you make my name into an adjective?
Slagelian.
Well, the German is Slagle.
Slagelian. That's a little bit harder. Yeah. Well, we'll have to do it. One of the listeners, drop it in the comments.
I shouldn't have said that.
That's right.
I don't want to be an adjective.
Yeah. Which is funny, Jim, because you're also a very private person, but this book is about to blow up, and that's going to have to leave. So welcome to the front stage. Welcome to the world, man. You're going to get all these emails, hopefully. So
I don't know if I'd say I'm a private person. I'm just, I hate other people and they hate me, and everything's.
Yeah, that's not private. Yeah. Let's jump in. Jim, who is the target of the Plantingian skyhook?
Naturalists.
Yeah. Okay. And can we define? I know it's tricky, but what is what is naturalism?
Yeah, that is tricky. So I'm not going to do it. Naturalism basically is just the idea that nature is all that exists. But then you say, how do you define nature? And originally, and I talk about this in the epistemological skyhook. Originally, you had materialism. Mm-hmm. This is just in the modern era I'm talking about. That everything is matter, and then you started saying, well, there's other things that function besides matter. There seems to be forces, like gravity. So they just said physical. Physicalism is a very popular term in philosophy. And naturalism just says whatever science defines as nature, that's naturalism. But then the thing is that there's no set definition, because all those different ideas have different, I mean, you refute one form of naturalism, you're not going to refute another.
Yeah.
And so I just follow Plantinga and saying, instead of defining it, he's just going to give some of the entailments of naturalism, and how it addresses that. So he's just saying it entails that there's no non-physical element to the human being. There's no soul, there's no mind, there's no supernatural agents like God. There's nothing like that. Mm-hmm. So that's how he defines it. I mean, because really when people think of naturalism, they think, well, it's just the denial of supernaturalism.
Right.
But then what's supernaturalism affirming beyond naturalism?
Yeah.
So you never have this. You have naturalism, which is anti-supernaturalism, but supernaturalism, which is anti-naturalism, which is, you never
get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I found to be super tricky. Okay. Yeah. So that's what we're going with. We're following Plantinga. You can take it up with him if you don't like it. Yeah. I thought we could start with skepticism, because you did such a fantastic treatment of Descartes, mm-hmm. and his project with the evil demon, and I think probably in a way that I haven't heard before, which is really sad because I probably should have. But the interaction between the evil demon and the cogito is really interesting. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to start with skepticism, because that's what we're going to be threatening the naturalist with. Mm-hmm. So just real quick, I don't actually know how to say this in Latin. It's mauvais genie. Do you know how to say that?
Mauvais. It's not. Yeah, mauvais genie. It's French.
Oh, it's French. Okay, that makes sense. He's French. Yeah,
mauvais genie.
But then the cogito is in Latin, right?
Cogito is in Latin, yeah, but that's because the phrase cogito ergo sum doesn't appear in the Meditations.
Right.
He has similar ideas, but he doesn't have that phrase. That phrase comes in, I think it's in Principles of Philosophy, which was
reflect something on the method. On the method?
Reflections on the method.
Yeah, it might be that one. Well, yeah. So a lot of people, most of the listeners, going to know Descartes famous for cogito ergo sum. I think therefore I am. We've done it over and over on the podcast. But what's interesting that you bring up is whether or not the cogito evades the evil demon, or does the evil demon? Do we just bracket that out to avoid self-defeat? What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, what I say is that the point of bringing the evil demon into the game here is that you're trying to ask, is it possible to deny even basic elementary ideas like 2 + 3 = 5? Is that possible? Mm-hmm. And he says, well, if there were an evil demon, yeah, it would be possible, because 2 + 3 = 5, it's just blatantly obvious, but maybe it's wrong, and the evil demon is just manipulating my brain to make me think it's obvious and I can just see it, but X hypothesis, it's false. And so he says, but at the bottom, I can't deny that I exist because I'm thinking, I doubt, therefore I am, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then I just say that, well, wait a minute, the evil demon, the whole point was that there aren't any therefores. You don't get to have a therefore. Mm-hmm. So you can't, why are you allowed this particular ergo when all the other ergos have been banished by the evil demon? And that's addressed in the original responses to Descartes' Meditations. Antoine Arnauld said, how does that work? And he just said, and Descartes said, I'm putting this framed as an argument just to give you just to kind of trigger the idea, but it's not actually an argument. Granted, with ergo, it's going to sound like it.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying we immediately intuit this and we can't deny it, because what do I say in there? I say, if I said to Descartes, I doubt that I exist, Descartes would say, who exactly is it that you think doesn't exist? I'd have to say me.
Right.
I am the one that I think does not exist. Yeah. So in order to doubt my existence, I have to affirm it, presuppose it.
That's right.
So that's what he's trying to do. So granted, when it's put in the form of an argument, it can be misleading, but he's just saying that or at least what he says is, he's just putting it in that format in order to trigger the intuition.
Yeah. I think I really like that, because I love transcendental arguments, which is why, I'm so drawn to your book, because it's very similar. If it's not a negative transcendental argument, it's very similar to one. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like this. It's like you can only disaffirm it on the pains of performative inconsistency, which is to say that it's self-defeating to say that. So you can't say that. And I think I love it. And I've told my listeners before, I think he stole it from Augustine. Augustine said, see Fowler, assume if I'm mistaken, then I exist. And it's the same kind of thing, right? It's if Augustine was arguing against the academicians who Plato's heirs, and they became skeptics, and Plato's rolling in his grave. But Augustine, goes against them, and Descartes just kind of grabs that and goes, well, fine, if I doubt, then I exist.
I don't know if he did that intentionally, but
I don't know.
Maybe he did. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I don't know about footnotes back then, right? Maybe he didn't. Maybe that wasn't as rigorous of a thing. But do you think the cogito works? Because I think you'd probably hold more to planning as epistemology, if I'm not mistaken, wouldn't you?
I don't agree with planning as epistemology.
Whoa, all right, man.
I'm not a naturalized epistemologist,
dude.
I think he's got some stuff going on that I strongly agree with, but any kind of naturalized epistemology, I think, is just too far. It just goes too far.
Yeah.
Because it's descriptive. And like I say, planning it where do we get the normativity from? There's no normativity. So planning it says, well, there's God, and God gives the normativity. He's like, okay, but there's normativity involved in my individual thinking.
Yeah.
So, and if you're a hardcore 5-point looking for a 6th and 7th point Calvinist, then maybe you can embrace this naturalized epistemology. But I'm not a Calvinist at all, so I can't. Well, it's like, I think last time you asked me if I'm an externalist or an internalist, and I said, well, you got to have both, right?
Right.
There's some things where you need it, and some things where you need to know that you know something, and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And I don't think planning really disagrees with that. It's just that I don't think with naturalized epistemology you're going to be able to get that.
Yeah.
This kind of gets down to your question about, can we have theistic determinism?
Mm-hmm.
Because the question is, if it's just something that's being done to me, if it's happening to me, if there's no agency at all involved on my account, then how do I even believe anything?
Yeah.
The concept of belief seems to involve my affirmation that I recognize something as true and so accept it.
Right.
Because I receive information that I don't accept.
Right. And
so,
you made a really we'll get back to evolutionary argument, but this is so good because you made this really helpful clarification in the epistemological skyhook that you need an explanation for your belief. And you say explanation because instead of reason, because you're trying to hit both internalists and externalists.
Yeah, right.
And so you say explanation instead of reason because maybe reason's responsiveness is too internalistic or something like that. So you say there's got to be an explanation, but it has to be a good explanation, and it has to be your explanation. And if it's not your explanation, then it's someone else's. And this is where I saw the implications for theological determinism is, if it's God's explanation ultimately, then God's responsible for that belief. And if I'm acting on that belief, then he acquires all the culpability, whether it's good or bad. And so all the evil that I've done now collapses down into God, and it's his fault. And so that was what I was trying to defend against. And I ended up going with a reasons responsive kind of view that God determines, but he determines, and I borrow from I defend Kevin Van Hooser's model of dialogical determinism, that God determines by dialoguing with us and presenting us reasons. And so he knows what it would take for me to understand this. He gives us illumination and persuasion.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that determinism, though.
Well, he's determining my beliefs still. He knows that I will believe A at time T, because he knows what it would take to persuade me to that. So I'm still determined to believe this. I can't do otherwise. But he's going through my rational faculties.
Well, I could do otherwise. If God presented me with something else, then that's what would happen. So I don't think that would be determinism. God's accommodating what he presents to me based on what I would choose to do.
Yeah, but
so I don't think that's determinism.
Okay, you're determined to believe it, though, right? So you're determined to believe A at time T. You can't do otherwise unless God presented you something else.
Well, I'm determined. Are you talking about just logical determinism? That I'm determined to believe A at times T, regardless of whether God exists or not. Just a million years ago, it was true that I would believe A.
I wouldn't go with that. I think that falls to your. I think that type of determinism falls to your criteria, and then I'm not responsible. It's not really my belief at all.
Oh,
So free will and my epistemic warrant go out the window unless it's through it has to be my reasons. It has to be, reasons responsive. And I have to have mechanism ownership. He can't evade and go through and manipulate me. It's got to be presented to me. And so yeah, it's a whole thing. I'll send you the thing. Maybe we could talk about it again.
Send it to me. Yes.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Okay, so getting back to we were talking about Descartes a little bit. We're talking about internalism, externalism, and I love what you say that we kind of need both here. Descartes was he the father of internalism, you'd say, or what do you think?
No, there were internalists before him, but
okay,
it's kind of I wouldn't say he's the father of it, but he's the favorite son.
Okay.
he's the one that basically made it. He made internalism cool again, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to stick to finish up with the skeptical part here. Do you think so? Descartes brought on his ontological argument, I think, to try and refute the evil demon. Demon. Does that work? Are you persuaded by that? Do you think it?
No, I don't think his ontological argument works.
Okay.
But regardless, even if it did, I don't think it would refute the evil demon. Because unless we're positing the evil demon as a perfect being, except imperfect in the sense of morality and being evil, unless we're in that case, there would be two gods that share all the same attributes but are distinct, and they conflict with each other. It's difficult to make sense of that. In fact, if you have two all-powerful beings that are different, they're going to their intentions are going to conflict, and so when one's going to have to be overruled by the other, in which case the first one isn't all-powerful.
Yeah.
So that in that sense, it would prove it if he's positing the evil demon as all-powerful.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have to be taken that way. He could be it's an incredibly powerful demon or spiritual force that's devoted itself to making me think 2 + 3 = 5 when it doesn't.
Yeah.
And does the existence of God go against that? Well, not only does it not go against that, I mean, Christianity tells us there's something like that already with the idea that there's a Satan who's the current lord of the air, and he's blinded the eyes of many.
Yeah, father of lies. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like the evil demon is actually here.
Yeah, he's not all powerful, but he's very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the question becomes, can the argument survive that? Because one of the objections to the EAAN, that's how you say it, by the way, with the initials, EAAN.
It's so long. It's such a mouthful. Yeah.
Just say planning a skyhook. That's
easier.
Yeah,
that's better.
One of the objections is that you can create a tu quoque argument against theism or Christianity in particular. And so that becomes the question. If God has created a being like Satan, who is not only what Christians have traditionally thought he is, but is able to basically play the same kind of role as naturalism plays for the naturalist, then can we avoid this talk of naturalism being defeated, but theism is not? And so the 11th chapter, a large portion of it is responding to those tu quoque arguments.
Yeah.
Trying to say that it doesn't, although I don't really bring Satan into it, but
Yeah. No, that's good. So for the audience who don't know what tu quoque is, it's and to you also, it's like it may be a problem for me, but what about you? It's whataboutism. Like you got a problem too.
It's whataboutism.
Yeah.
Which is whataboutism. First of all, if you've already got a cool Latin name for something, don't make up something that sounds stupid.
Yeah.
That's just the same thing.
That's right.
Second of all, sometimes it's a fallacy, sometimes it's not. It depends. Right.
Yeah, it depends on the situation and how it's being used, and sometimes it's appropriate to use that, and it's not an informal fallacy.
Sometimes the reason people are bringing it up is like, well, you believed it was bad when X did it, but you don't believe it's bad when Y does it.
Right.
Like, well, that's just what about it. It's like, no, I'm changing the subject to whether you're a hypocrite. Yeah. I get to do that.
Right. Yeah, and it's similar to like an ad hominem, where it's like sometimes that's an important thing to point out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, rhetorically, or even argumentatively.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go. That's awesome. I love the Descartes stuff. It blows my mind. You mentioned in a podcast a couple years back that you're toying with the idea of building an epistemology up from like a skyhook or like from Descartes kind of cogito. I'm waiting for it, man. I'm ready for it. It'll be so awesome.
Yeah. I wouldn't be building it up. I would be reverse engineering it.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's what it would have to do. Descartes, the reason he failed is because he's trying to,
right.
I don't need to get into that. But
it's like reverse foundationalism. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I want to go with local skepticism. So we kind of got this idea of like global skepticism. If there's this powerful or all powerful evil genie, evil demon. So local skepticisms are aimed at certain types of beliefs, like metaphysical beliefs, ethical beliefs. Metaphysical beliefs is interesting. I just had a podcast episode with Tom Crisp and Tyler McNabb on that, but you brought up ethical beliefs, and I was so fired up because you bring up Sharon Street's moral EAAN, right? Like she wouldn't call it that, but Tom Nagel does, or he might allude to it. Can you lay that out for us? Do you have that on top of your mind?
Basically, her idea, as I understand it, is that, and she's not using it as an argument against naturalism, actually.
Right.
But she's arguing against moral realism. Mm-hmm. She says that even if there were a world of moral truths, there's no reason to think that the evolutionary process would ever come in contact with it.
Yeah.
And even so, there's no reason to think that there's this realm of moral truth. So there's no reason to think that our beliefs, our moral beliefs, are anything more than what's hardwired into us through the evolutionary process for our own survival, and don't point to any objective moral truths.
Yeah.
And that's partially the claim is because of normativity.
Yeah.
Normativity is basically shouldness.
Yep.
Right. Oughtness. It's what you should or shouldn't do, which is blatantly is most blatant in ethics. Right.
Yeah.
But she points out that normativity isn't just in ethics. I mean, it's in value studies. So you got ethics, you have political philosophy, you have aesthetics, but it's also in epistemology in general, because a lot of epistemologists who aren't naturalized epistemologists say that knowledge is intrinsically normative. So you can't erase the normativity. But the whole idea is you can't get an ought from an is, and if all there is, then you can't get to an ought. And so she says that you can't have these normative reasons. But where she cuts the line is where she says you can't have normative reasoning either. So you can't trust those conclusions, but you can have just immediate sensory beliefs, because those aren't formed, at least they're not obviously formed. And there's people who contest this. Donald Davidson would contest this.
Yeah.
Jae-Won Kim would contest this. But that forming a belief is not intrinsically normative. So it allows for the truth of our sensory beliefs. Yeah. And then presumably you could try to use that to build up from our sensory beliefs being reliable to our scientific beliefs being reliable to naturalism being a reasonable position.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's just like raw, just pure empiricism, right? Your perceptual beliefs are safe. And I love her argument. I first came across it in Thomas Nagel's Mind and Cosmos. Right.
He calls it, what is he saying there? He says moral beliefs are a wheel that turns without being attached to anything.
Yeah.
Or an objective realm of morality would be a wheel that doesn't attach to anything. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's great because she's actually on the other side. So Thomas Nagel goes, well, they're on the other side. Thomas Nagel wants to say, well, there are moral. I'm a moral realist, and she's saying she's cutting this tie between Darwinistic evolution or that type of naturalism and normative moral beliefs, moral realism. And she's saying, well, that means we need to give that up. And Nagel goes, well, I'm not giving that up. I'll rather give up naturalistic evolutionary theory than moral realism. I can't give that up. So it kind of depends on where you're at with your priors.
Yeah. But I think Louise Anthony said that too. Louise Anthony said any argument against the objectivity of against moral realism will have to proceed by premises that are less plausible than moral realism itself. So at any point, it's just going to be more plausible to just accept moral realism.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think Lewis makes a pretty good point of that in Mere Christianity, because you bump into somebody and now you have this problem of morality. What ought I do? Should I apologize? Should they apologize? Beyond mere convention. I also think so I used this argument because I think there's a normativity to knowledge, and I know that triggers a lot of people, but I think you're on board with this. I think we've talked about this before, where there's a between the two premises and the conclusion, or however many premises in the conclusion, there's an ought. That, like, you ought to affirm this conclusion if you find the premises sound, if they're
Logical
true.
Normativity. Yes, that's a thing.
And so if you think that, then we talked about Sharon Street last time, and it seems like it might be self-defeating. It might be. I need to develop it more. But to give an argument and then cut off that ethical normative link in the argument between the premises and the conclusion, it's like, well, then I don't have to believe your conclusion at all. But I have to. You know that I have to. Like, your position is refuting your position, perhaps, or self-stultifying or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've taught me to be careful with self-defeat and self-refutation. I think. Do you have a paper by that name?
Yeah,
that's right.
Self-defeat, self-refutation, and self-defeat.
Yeah, I love that.
Analyse.
Yeah. Well,
I'll send it to you.
I already have it. You already sent it to me. I love it. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
It's been helpful. So that's local skepticisms, but we got global skepticism as well, which would be targeting all of our beliefs, or all the beliefs produced by our cognitive faculties. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, is planning a skyhook, is it a global threat? Should it be a global threat? What do you think?
Well, you can take it either way. I mean, I argue for it as a global skeptical claim. Mm-hmm. But I also deal with, there's some people who say, no, we shouldn't do that because, but I mean, a lot of the reasons for not wanting to do that are not philosophical reasons. They're just because it's not, people aren't going to listen to you if you make it a global skeptical claim.
Right.
So people say we should be skeptical of metaphysical beliefs, or normative reasons, or scientific beliefs. That's an interesting one.
That's Popper, right? That would be Popper. What you just laid out for us earlier.
Would he do that? I think he said scientific determinism was self-refuting.
Okay.
But William Talbot argues that it's science. And then there was a couple, I forget their names, a couple of guys whose last names both begin with G, had an article like a year ago where they said something similar to Talbot, where they argued that you need a very specific kind of moral realism in order for scientific inference or inference to the best explanation to take place.
Yeah.
And that's inconsistent with naturalism.
Yeah, totally.
So they basically argue. So they say it takes away your belief for evolution, which takes away any justification in believing in naturalism. Mm-hmm. And they see it as a variation on Plantinga's. Okay. William Talbot has argued something similar and bigger than that, but he sees his as a distinct argument from Plantinga's. He's a critic of Plantinga's argument.
Yeah, right. That's what was confusing when I was reading your book, because he's one of the critics. I think he's in Naturalism Defeated, right?
Yeah.
And he says evolutionary forces would only select for local conditions, not global conditions.
Right.
And so, you kind of end up with this kind of global skepticism, because there's no reason to think that we should be able to reason about the world, the whole world, including abstracta and stuff. Yeah. If evolutionary theory, I thought that was really interesting.
Right. Now, he posits that there are these metaphysically necessary truths that link the local environment to cosmic absolute truth.
Oh, okay.
So that we can do that.
Okay.
And I call that what did I say? Quasi-Platonism or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was like, he didn't like that. He doesn't see it that way. He doesn't see it as quasi-Platonism. I mean, or quasi-formal causes,
Right.
But I said, well, just you don't have to take them that way. Just it's saying they sound like formal causes in some sense, and mm-hmm. the fact that they're different in many other senses, that's fine. I'm just saying that in a few important regards, they're like formal causality.
Yeah.
Right. These necessary truths that are like, they're not causing. They're not like the efficient causes.
Inert. Yeah.
Right. They're like the principles by which these things are reflected, or something like that.
Yeah, or they're like aimed at those or something. Yeah, that's weird.
Read his articles. He's the guy. It's people like William Talbot who make you realize how little you've accomplished in life. I mean, he's just scary smart.
Yeah. Some of these dudes are freaky smart. Well, so you think that we should maximize it and make it a global threat, that the Plantin's argument ought to be that way?
Well, I mean, there's pros and cons of both sides, right?
Okay.
If you just make it a local thing that applies to naturalism, but it's just a local skepticism, people are going to be more willing to listen to you. But then part of the reason they're going to do that is because there's a bunch of other stuff that isn't being addressed, and they think maybe if we explore this, we can shore up the problems and bring it back.
Yeah.
If it's global, then you can't do that. There's nothing outside that you can bring in to do it. It's global.
Right. Yeah.
But then as soon as you say that, people's heads start exploding. So the concern is what kind of effect it will have, not whether it's valid. I think the whole problem with naturalism is belief content. And that's something that would apply across the board to all beliefs, regardless. So,
well, and I like that. I catch the metaphysical version. I'm still kind of debating because I'm working on one myself, and I like that because of what you said, the kind of rhetorical effect, but it doesn't have the panache of saying like, and you can't believe what you believe about your dog either. Your precious dog. Well, sorry, man, that's out. Because we got if naturalism and evolution or naturalistic evolution, then all your beliefs are gone, including that one, and then you got this full circle, snake biting its tail type thing. Yeah.
Well, the problem it would just say that your beliefs would still be true. It's just that you have another belief that makes a defeater for every other belief you have.
Right.
So it's like if I believed my dog is cute, and also that there are no rational beliefs anywhere, no one has any rational beliefs, then that would challenge my belief that my dog is cute.
Right.
Well, there you go.
And I've heard people, some people, maybe they don't get it, maybe I'm not understanding them, but they're like, no, that's just something that seems right to me. It's a seeming. It's like, I think it is right. I think you are probably right. So that means you should let go of N and E, because if N and E, then you're not right here. So if it seems right to you, then go ahead and let go of N and E. That's what you need to do. That's why it's a global skeptical threat. It's threatening you. So you let go of the thing that's doing the threatening. Otherwise you get global skepticism.
Yeah, I say in the book, that, look, if theism entailed something like the evil demon argument, evil demon type of skepticism, if you could show that any form of theism just entails that, the response shouldn't just be, well, that's outrageous. That's crazy to think that there's an evil demon who does that. Right. The response should also be, well, if theism entails that, reject theism. Right. Reject what leads to the crazy situation.
Exactly.
So that's the idea with naturalism. It leads to this situation, so therefore you should reject what leads to it.
Yeah.
And of course, when people, this is part of my interaction with William Talbot, that when people hear this and they say there's an inconsistency there, they're not going to just reject the argument or reject their belief in naturalism. They're going to put the argument on the side and start exploring and finding a way to get around it. So they're going to bracket it and keep thinking, right? It's like there should be admired in skepticism. Well, they're not. They're going to bracket it and keep reasoning and then try to figure out if there's another way out. If they keep leading back to it, eventually they're going to say, hey, all roads lead to crap. Maybe I should just not go the other way.
Right.
That's the idea.
I love that.
Crap.
No, you can say crap. It's fine. I think that's what actually happens. That's why I love like negative transcendental arguments. I love skeptical threats. I love kind of skepticism, because it's so fun. It's not like it's not a full blown. It's not always like a full blown reductio ad absurdum. It's more like reductio ad absurdum, like down the road. You're like, hey, if you keep going this route, you don't have anything left, so stop going this route. That's why it's a threat. I love that. Those are so much more fun to me. If you can come up with a contradiction, that's great. But I just haven't been able to pull one out yet. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about naturalized epistemology, just kind of the background. What does that mean, and where does it come from?
It comes from Quine. I mean, there were things going on before that. Evolutionary epistemology was already not under that name, but it was already going on in the late 19th century. I mean, as soon as Darwin published On the Origin of Species, people were saying, well, let's apply that to human beings and to the human mind,
Right.
In fact, in the epistemological skyhook, I have a few pages on Arthur Balfour,
My guy,
who wrote an essay on that issue, saying there's a problem applying this Darwinian survival of the fittest to the mind within 20 years of the publication of On the Origin of Species, right?
Yeah, fantastic.
So you had evolutionary epistemology going on for a while, and then it kind of, you had there were other that was going on, but in the late 60s you had Willard Van Orman Quine come up with naturalized epistemology, where he says, let's just build our theory of knowledge based entirely on what's available to us in the sciences and nothing more. Don't bring anything in that's not from the sciences. And when he first presented it, he didn't explicitly say, therefore, no normativity, but he doesn't address normativity. And then one of the immediate objections is, well, where's the normativity? I mean, he basically says, why don't we just settle for psychology, descriptive psychology?
Right.
Everyone, including Quine, later Quine, said, yeah, you can't really get rid of normativity that way. I mean, Plantinga points out, first of all, that science, not the hard sciences like physics and chemistry, but once you get into the life sciences, there's normativity everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. There's teleology everywhere.
Right.
And the issue with evolution is just that with evolution, that was the paradigm of why we need teleology. And then they showed a way for it to work without teleology. They said, okay, well, that was the hardest case, so therefore everything else is going to fall in the line.
Right.
Well, with science, often it doesn't. That often happens. The things you thought were going to be hardest end up being easy, and the things you thought were going to be easy end up being hard. They thought the origin of life was easy, right? Spontaneous generation happens all the time, and that just turns out to be just insanely difficult.
Yeah.
So it just because sometimes that hard things turn out to be easy doesn't mean that that's the only direction things go in. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here.
That's good. It's gold.
But so Quine said, let's just base everything off of science. And Plantinga points out that, well, even descriptive psychology is just rife with normativity.
Yeah.
So you're going to have normativity. And Quine says, yeah, you do need normativity. And then that gets into a deeper issue with whether you can get by with just a technical normativity or hypothetical imperatives.
Yeah.
And I argue in both books, that you can't, for knowledge, it cannot be a hypothetical imperative. It has to be a categorical imperative. And whether that's consistent with naturalism doesn't seem to be. So knowledge requires a categorical instead of a hypothetical imperative.
What would the hypothetical, I'm sure depending on the person, the thinker, they would pick different ones. But what's like a good example of a hypothetical that someone would give?
Well, in general, it would be like, if you want to accomplish this goal, then you should do this.
Yeah.
That's hypothetical, but because you can get around it by saying, okay, I'm not going to pursue that goal. But if the goal is rationality, you can say, I want to pursue rationality, you should engage in this. Oh, well, I just reject that goal.
Yeah.
You can't reject that goal because the idea is that you can you can reject that goal and still be rational. You're not pursuing the means to that end because you can rationally not have to pursue that end.
Yeah.
But you can't rationally refrain from pursuing rationality.
Yeah. Right.
So,
skyhook. Boom. So that's like, so just for those who might be lost with the hypothetical language. So if a hypothetical imperative would be like, if you want a happy marriage, then you shouldn't beat your wife. If you don't want to have marital strife, don't beat your wife. But there's hypothetical and then categorical. A categorical imperative would be never beat your wife. It's wrong to beat your wife. What the heck? And so, that's helpful. So with the naturalist would attempt a categorical, hypothetical imperative when really what you need is a categorical. And categorical is one you can't really escape, even because our thinking, presupposes this categorical.
Yeah,
that's so good, man. I love that.
I would also point out that there's slightly more to marriage than a happy marriage. not beating your wife.
That's great. Yeah, it's pretty low down there. Just yeah, there's a lot more to it. That's good. So I pulled this great quote from Peter Geach. I think it's Geach. Geach. Yeah. So he says, when we hear of someone
married to Elizabeth Anscombe.
Oh yeah,
he's the husband of Elizabeth Anscombe.
That's why I know that name. He sided with Lewis on the argument from reason.
I hear that, but I'm not sure if he. That's just rumor.
Okay.
I think Victor Reppert said that, but he specifically said that that's a rumor that he did.
Okay.
That. I'd have to.
That's a rumor I'm willing to propagate here.
Let's start urban legends. It's fun.
That's right. Just keep it going. That's all that matters. So Peter Geach says, when we hear of some new attempt to explain reasoning or language or choice naturalistically, we ought to react as if we were told someone had squared the circle or proved square root of 2 to be rational. Only the mildest curiosity is in order. How well has the fallacy been concealed? I love that.
I use that as an epigraph.
Mm-hmm.
The Planningus chapter, actually.
Yeah. And those epigraphs might alone be worth the 2 books. I love those.
Do you like the epigraphs in the new book too?
So good. I grabbed this one from the new book. I think you maybe.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah. I mean, you should. I have. In the last book, I had my favorite epigraphs were the one for the chapter on eliminative materialism. In the new one, my favorite epigraphs are the ones from the chapter on eliminative materialism.
Dude, I have noticed that you take particular aims to just destroy eliminative materialism.
I fear that means I'm insecure about it, but I really, that's just, I'm not confident about hardly anything, but that's something that I just can't make my mind do it, you know?
Right.
I can't, it's like I can't, I mean, C.S. Lewis had the analogy of trying to pour wine into the cavity at the bottom of the bottle you're pouring from. It's like, I can't get my mind to do that. I can't do it. So,
can you tell the audience like what is eliminative materialism?
Well, it's eliminative because it says that the things that we ascribe to mind are wrong. They're not to be explained to something else. They don't exist. Mm-hmm. They describe like beliefs, chains of reasoning, norms. I mean, all these things are just all there is the physical processes, neural processes of the brain. That's all there is. And so beliefs don't exist. No one's ever had a belief. No one ever will. It's impossible because they can't fit it in within the confines of naturalism.
Right.
So that's they can't fit it in. So they say there can't be any belief. To them, I guess they take that beliefs would be supernatural evidence. Just the fact that there are beliefs would be evidence of supernatural.
Yeah.
And then when you apply the skyhook to them, you end up saying, okay, but you're asserting all these things. They go, well, we don't believe them though, because there aren't any beliefs. It's like, okay, then what are you saying? In order for me to make sense of what you're saying, I have to know what you're saying. So, and so that's the point. I mean, it basically takes away their presentation, their thesis takes away any reason I have for understanding the arguments for and the definition of eliminativism in the first place.
Right.
It's just an empty concept that there's nothing to unravel there.
And there might not even be concepts at all anyways. So,
well, there aren't concepts. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. They say there aren't concepts.
Right. So it's like a really, really strong case of kicking Wittgenstein's ladder away. Hey, you know, you got up here to believe me, and now just the world is completely changed. And
I say in the book, I say it's just too bad that the structure they climbed onto was made out of shaving cream.
Right. Yeah. Van Til has a line about that. It's like it's trying to it's like a man made of water trying to escape the ocean on a ladder made of water. And it's just like it's not happening. What are you talking about? Yeah. I think you also have a paper maybe called Yes, Eliminative Materialism is Self-Defeating.
Yeah.
That's another. It's great. I love that you believe those guys. Okay, so we got naturalized epistemology. Planning is I didn't know this until I heard you on a podcast a couple years back. Like part of Planningus genius is that he's couching his epistemology as a naturalized epistemology, and then he brings in like the skyhook to kick off all the naturalists.
Right. Yeah.
do you think it's successful? Like, is proper functionalism like a successful theory? Because again, you mentioned we need some internalism. What do we make of it? Yeah.
Well, proper functionalism is just that's basically Planning's version of normativity. It needs something that's normative, and proper functioning is that because you should function properly.
Yeah. So
he kind of takes it out of the realm of being intentionally doing it. That's why he kind of disperses it or puts it in the hands of God and said, God set us up with these functions that we follow.
Yeah.
But it's a normative thing. And if you try to, and he addresses in the penultimate chapter in Warrant to Proper Function, before he gives the EAAN, he has this chapter on, can we get rid of proper function? And ultimately it would be saying, can we get rid of any kind of normativity in thinking? And he just says that none of the attempts to do so are successful. Basically, you can't have functionality within naturalism. And if you look at it as a sort of a fictionalism, right? Like imaginary numbers or whatever. Can we look at functions that way? It's like, well, I guess you could, but then there's no real. First of all, that doesn't refute the argument at all, because the argument just says if you don't have any functions, then that's just in the position where you don't have any reason to trust your beliefs. Right. So it doesn't affect the argument one way or the other. But what would be the argument for thinking that functions don't really exist? And it's like, as far as I can tell, the argument is, I really, really want naturalism to be true.
Yeah.
Therefore, functions don't exist, which is, I think, Nietzsche's argument against God, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If God existed, I couldn't stand not being him. Therefore, there is no God.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I thought we could finish up here by looking at the final form of Planning's argument.
Mm-hmm.
I'm spacing on the name of the book. Where the conflict really lies.
Really lies, yeah.
And that is, do you think that's his official? Like, this is it. This is the best one.
Well, he calls it official.
Yeah.
Although he does say he hopes it's the last version. So I haven't seen him develop it further beyond this. So
okay. Well, so I have it here. I'll probably drop it in the comments or something like that on YouTube, or maybe on Anchor as well. But so I'll just go through the premises, and I think the most important ones to kind of motivate would be premise 1 and 2. So the probability of our rational faculties being reliable on naturalism and evolution is low. That's premise 1. Premise 2, anyone who accepts or believes naturalism and evolution and sees that the probability of our rational faculties being reliable on naturalism and evolution is low, they have a defeater for the reliability of our cognitive faculties. So if you accept naturalistic evolution or naturalism and evolution, and you see premise 1 that the probability of our rational faculties is low on naturalism and evolution, then you have a defeater for the reliability of your cognitive faculties. I'm using different words. I'm sorry, folks. I'm botching this. But then 3, anyone who has a defeater for the rational faculties has a defeater for the reliability of our rational faculties, has a defeater for any belief she thinks she has, including naturalism and evolution itself. For if one who accepts naturalism and evolution thereby acquires a defeater for naturalism and evolution is self-defeating and can't rationally be accepted. Conclusion: naturalism and evolution can't rationally be accepted. So I love this argument. I think it's fantastic. How do we motivate 1 and 2 that the probability of our rational faculties being reliable on naturalism and evolution is low? Like, what motivates that?
For Planning or for me? I mean,
either way. Yeah.
The justification I come to that is the difficulty of there being propositional content to our beliefs on naturalism. So I have the belief that what's the one I give in the book, that the state of Oregon is larger than the United Kingdom.
Oh yeah,
right.
Okay.
It's a belief, and it has propositional content. Namely, it has as its content the proposition: the state of Oregon is larger than the United Kingdom. Okay. But how can just a physical object have propositional content?
Right.
It's not clear. And planning, it just says that this is, it's a category mistake. It's a category error to say that it's possible.
Yeah.
They just don't have propositional content. And this is where Richard Taylor's argument that he references comes in.
Yeah.
Taylor says that if you see you're in a train, you look out the window and you see spelled out in white rocks on a hillside, British Railways welcomes you to Wales.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now there's two possibilities. Either someone intentionally put them there to communicate that message, or it just happened by chance, like the sun and the wind and the rain bleached the rocks. They rolled down into that configuration by chance. Mm-hmm. He says that's possible. And now, ignoring which one is more plausible than not, his point is that if I accept the second explanation, that it was just an accident, then I no longer have any basis for thinking that those rocks do communicate that message.
Exactly.
It's just that it fell into a configuration that I would ascribe propositional content to if it had been made by an intelligent being.
Right.
But since by the position is that they weren't there by an intelligent being, I have no basis for accepting the claim.
Yeah.
With naturalism, if beliefs with propositional content arose, there wouldn't be a control over the content of the beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, evolution, part of the objection would be that evolution, not that it would select belief, but that it would select reliable belief forming processes, right? But this is the distinction that Plantinga makes, and I really go to town on, between indicators and depictors.
I was hoping we could get into that. Yeah.
Yeah, the indicators indicate something. So you have all kinds of indicators all throughout your body that tell your body that respond to external circumstances or internal circumstances or whatever. Like we have indicators for saline content in our blood, things like this.
Mm-hmm.
But a depictor would be something that depicts a situation, which would be depicting, mean it would have propositional content.
Mm-hmm.
And evolution would certainly select indicators, reliable indicators. But there's no reason to think it would select reliable depictors, because the depictor and the indicator can be about completely different things.
Yeah.
Right? Like the indicator says that, look out, there's an approaching tiger off to the right there, about 10 yards away. Mm-hmm. And the depictor says, my soup is cold. Right? It has nothing to do with it. There's no reason to think there'd be a connection there.
Yeah.
And then there's the counter response, which is covered by Richard Otte. I'm not sure I pronounce his last name, Otte. Mm-hmm. He said, we don't experience our brains being completely incoherent, like that every indicator has a completely irrelevant depictor or belief associated with it. So that would just mean that our depictors aren't arranged haphazardly, but they seem to be coherent at least.
Yeah.
That they appear to be coherent, but that doesn't mean that they connect to the world in any way.
Yeah, they could be coherent and have no correspondence at all.
Yeah. I mean, there's people who think that the world we're living in is a computer simulation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that's, I mean, I don't agree with them.
Yeah.
But that's a coherent idea. So
yeah, I try to apply an EAAN against that idea. But yeah.
Well, you could. Yeah, you could.
Yeah. Because your belief forming your faculties would be aimed at a falsity that you live in base reality, not the simulated world that you do live in. And so if you come to believe that your cognitive faculties have been aimed at a falsity and not a truth, then you can't believe that you're in a computer simulation, because that's a belief produced by your so-called faulty belief forming faculties.
That's something like Hilary Putnam's, well, this is in the article I wrote on Eliminative materialism, like Hilary Putnam's argue against brain in the vat skepticism.
So I don't understand Putnam's, and I read your article, I read Putnam's argument, and Putnam, I think this is a little bit before the strong distinction between self-defeat and self-refutation, because Putnam goes, there's a self-refutation here, because all of our concepts in the brain, in the vat, invatted language does not correspond to uninvatted language or objects out in reality. And so then we have this picture, and I think I'm trying to draw out what Putnam was arguing, that in the same picture you have you in a vat and you not in a vat, and that's a contradiction. And so it's self-refuting. But I want to say, look, I don't know about that. I'm not sure if Putnam's right or not, but it's certainly self-defeating, because you believe your cognitive faculties are not aimed at truth, but then you believe this one belief is true, even though it's produced by those faculties. So whether you're living in a computer simulation or not, it could be true, but it's certainly self-defeating to come to believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that. I mean, why would you think? Yeah, I mean, if it's a computer simulation, why trust the programmer? So
that's another aspect to it. Yeah. Okay, so that's good. I'm glad we got into that. That was fun. Putnam is so smart. I just need to read that paper again and go through. I kind of had Davidson in my mind when I was reading that, and still trying to wrestle through content externalism and whether I believe it or not. But so,
roughly, the way I would put it is that he's saying that if I'm a brain in a vat, my concept of vats and brains, for that matter, have nothing to do with the external world of vats and brains. Right? There's no connection, right. So I can't have the concept of a vat because there's no connection. So it's a causal theory of reference. Since I've never experienced an actual vat, I've only been, so I can't have the concept of a brain in a vat. So the fact that I do have the concept of a brain in a vat means that I'm not a brain in a vat.
Do you think that's a? Yeah, you think that's self-refuting? Do you think that's a actual contradiction there?
I'm not
that's
sure.
my hold up. I know how strong the claim is.
Yeah, it's going to be based on how deeply we accept his causal theory of reference.
Right.
I mean, if you think causal theories of reference have flaws or holes in them that you have to, then the argument doesn't work.
So that's why I tried to go more planning a route with the truth condition. Then it has to be aimed at truth. And if we are in a computer simulation, then all of our faculties are actually aimed at a falsity, our intuitions, namely that, hey, I think I live in base reality. Maybe this world is made up of digits or whatever. We find out that there's not superstrings, but they're digits. But I still think that this world, even if it is digital, is base reality. If I come to find out that this is a simulated world meant to look like base reality, and I've been deceived systematically to think that I live in base reality, I could never come to the belief that I live in a computer simulation without that being self-defeating.
Yeah.
So I want to go with Putnam if I can reason it through, because it's stronger claim. Then we get self-refutation and self-defeat, which would be great. Yeah. So let's go with two. So anyone who believes naturalism and evolution and sees that the probability of the reliability of our cognitive faculties on N and E are low, they have a defeater for the reliability of our cognitive faculties. Can you just flesh that out for us?
Because it would affect, if the probability that our cognitive faculties are reliable are low, then that would mean that our belief that our cognitive faculties are reliable would be defeated as well.
Right.
So it's not just because we have to get into conditionalization there, right? So, I mean, conditioned on this one belief, this low probability, it doesn't necessarily lead to a defeat. It's very low in probability that I would be dealt 4 kings right out of the gate in a game of poker, right? But I'm looking at them. I see them. I have been dealt them.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's not going to defeat the fact that it's so improbable. Doesn't defeat my belief that I've been dealt 4 kings.
Right.
Even so, it's improbable. But with the evolutionary argument, the problem is that it's about the source of beliefs.
Yeah.
So it calls into question the source of your beliefs, and if you don't have another source for those beliefs, then you don't have any way to shore up the weaknesses, if I could put it that way, shore up the improbability. So you're just stuck with this improbability, and that gives you a defeater.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yeah, you have nowhere else to turn. That is the fount of all your beliefs, including that belief. So if that's poisoned, then that belief is poisoned as well.
The way I put it is that, I mean, we get information from all sorts of sources, but what planning means by cognitive faculties is those forces that produce beliefs in us, where beliefs are propositional content mental depictors. And so our cognitive faculties aren't necessarily the source of them insofar as they're the gatekeeper that allows indicators to be transformed into depictors.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're the gatekeeper. I mean, it's not the source of information per se.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but it is the source of our beliefs.
Beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah. So the information comes in, and I don't want to get all Kantian or anything, but our cognitive faculties. Okay, all right. Well, they package things into content, propositions into this belief, or they're about probably the propositions, because I don't know if we have proposition in here, but we have beliefs about propositions. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that the whole manufacturing plant is jacked up, but the manufacturing plant in here is what produced that belief. So that belief is jacked up, and so if that belief is jacked up, you can't believe that, and so then you stop believing that one, and you go back to believing that your senses are reliable. Or your cognitive faculties. The factory, Yeah,
Kant's famous jacked up manufacturing factory analogy. Yes.
The famous one, yeah. That's awesome. Oh, man. We covered some good stuff here. I probably botched it by trying to give the propositional form of EAAN. It's notoriously hard to say that in a podcast, and I'm not fancy enough to put it up on the screen, but I think people will have appreciated that. Man, I love talking with you about philosophy, because you're the kind of philosopher that I want to be. You just chase down stuff all over the place, and it's really fun, man. So I love reading your stuff. Like I said earlier before we started recording, I wish we had like 18 hours just to go through it. I definitely recommend the book. I've read most of it. I've skimmed all of it, but I've read most of it, and it's fantastic, man. I appreciate the work you've done. I'm surprised that you put out the first book on it. Isn't it surprising that someone didn't do this earlier?
It kind of is. I mean, James Bealby with that edited volume.
Right, sure.
This is the first full-length book by a single author on this.
Right.
Yeah,
first one to give context and exposition and repercussion.
Unless you include dissertations, which really I think you should, because dissertations are difficult.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Have there been dissertations on it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a bibliography of the evolutionary argument against naturalism in the back of the book.
I'll check those.
And there's a decent number of dissertations.
Okay.
Most of them deal with it partially, but there's some that are exclusively about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. Okay, so Jim, if people did want to find you, could they? Is there anywhere to find you?
Yeah, I'm at University of Portland. Well, I'm not there. I teach from here.
Yeah.
Right now, but I'm at University of Portland. You can email me at slagle@up.edu. Okay,
awesome. Yeah, direct all your craziness to Jim. He's the man, dude. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast again. The epistemological skyhook is now in soft cover. That's true, right? I mean, you told me that earlier.
Yeah.
Checked. Okay.
Yeah, as of right before Christmas, they did it in soft cover.
That's
so
awesome.
It's less than $50 now.
Let's go. You have to get it then. Yeah. I seriously love the book. I read it maybe 4 times so far.
Jeez.
It's so good for tracking down other stuff too, because it's like this compendium of all these different arguments. So,
I think I don't want to toot my own horn. People are good at different things in philosophy. I think what I'm good at is research and kind of bringing these things.
That's why I like you. That's me. I love that. I want to synthesize, right? I want to pull all this stuff together, and then that's like the addition is like, hey, I saw this, and here you go. So my
problem is that you're never going to be done, and you're never going to be satisfied.
No,
you'll
never.
Publish something, you realize, there's this entire field of thought that I didn't know about.
There's too much.
So you're never done.
No, and some of these people are so happy just being like, this is my niche, and I will be in this form of this subdiscipline, and I'll focus on this the rest of my life. And like, you guys, that's not fair. That's not fair. How come I have to think about all of this stuff, and I get to stay shallow because I'm a mile, wide, and you get to go so deep in your little thing?
Well, there's analytic thinking, and then there's what do you call it?
Synthetic, or what do you?
What was the word you used?
Synthetic?
Not synthetic. I mean, there's analytic thinking where you focus on something and you keep following it down.
Yeah.
And then there's broad thinking where you're trying to look at everything and try to bring it together.
Yeah.
And modern knowledge, especially with science, has been really focused on the analytic side.
Right.
And you need a little bit of both, but everybody is differently balanced. Some people are really focused on the analytic. Some people are really focused on the, what's the word? I always forget the word.
Continental. You're not saying continental, are you?
Not continental, no. I mean, just bringing all the knowledge together, being a systematic thinking.
Yeah, systematic, big picture.
Yeah.
I don't know the word.
So you need a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Our modern era is focusing primarily on that, but everybody has a little bit of that. And I guess I'm just more on that bring everything together side.
Yeah.
That's just, yeah. I mean, I think I'm not bad at the analysis that I do. It's just that I only want to analyze the things that I bring together. So
yeah. Well, and your work on self-defeat and self-refutation has been really helpful too. And I think that's something that you've added at least clarity to the field, if not more. Is there anything, are you like taking a break now that you wrote this giant book on the EAAN, or are you working on something else right now?
Well, actually last summer, I just wrote down, I have, for the classes I teach, I have outlines, like 100-page outlines for all my classes.
Dang.
And I just decided to write out my science and religion class in a book. And so I wrote that out. And the problem is it's not publishable because it's really obnoxious. Okay. I mean, I'm just constantly every time I refer to something like geocentrism, from the Latin geo, meaning stupid, and centrism, meaning my bunions hurt, like things like this, just all throughout it. I'm just being silly.
Yeah. Is that because that's
how you erase those before I could even publish it?
Yeah. Is that because you teach your students and you toss in jokes and stuff like that, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
The first time I mentioned Aristotle, I have a footnote that says rhymes with Chipotle, things like this.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, I do too, but I mean, it's not something I'd have to be more serious about it. And
that's the sad thing. But you're able to be a little bit silly, at least in the epistemological skyhook and a little bit in that EAAN book.
Yeah, I got it. It breaks out. Yeah, I can't help it.
You shouldn't. Yeah,
I have to let my obnoxiousness roam free to some level.
That's right. I love it. I'm a kindred spirit with you there. Yeah. Well, this was a super fun episode, man. We got to do more. We got to talk about your bench press sometime, because that's ridiculous. So, can you toss that out? Do you feel confident telling us that? What's your your best ever?
Oh, I used to work out in my late teens and 20s, but I stopped because I have adult onset exercise induced asthma. Jeez. Okay. Huh. So it just led me I just kind of started spreading out because I couldn't exercise as much anymore. Yeah. And my wife and I went to do a study in a hospital, like a university study that had couples doing some exercises and see how it affects them and all this. And it was right before the epidemic broke out, and so it ended up not going anywhere. Mm. But they had to say they had us do just bench presses and leg presses, and it wasn't free weights. Okay, it was machines. Mm. And the bench press went up to 300, and I pushed up 300. And so they added more weight on it. I think another 25 pounds of free weights. They balanced on it, and they just said, do as many as you can. And I did 4 or 5.
It's insane, man. I'm so jealous of that.
Yeah. I haven't done bench presses in 25 years. So it's like,
well, maybe that's the key. Maybe if I stop now and I check back in like 20 years or whatever like that, we'll be set.
Eat more fried food. That's the secret to getting it. Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome.
The leg press, though, I never, because I never did legs. I didn't skip leg day. I just never had leg day because I was happy with how strong my legs were.
Okay.
Right. And then the leg press, I was like, well, I'd never exercised my legs, so this is going to be terrible. That went up to 500. I maxed that out.
Just a beast, man.
I put 25 pounds on it, and I did 12 reps, and they said, okay, just stop.
That's a sign, though. That's, why don't you take that as like an information download of like, get back into it, man. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't think this to look at me. You'd think he's a slightly scary, big fat turd. That's what you'd see if you looked at me.
I don't know. You got the Kingpin vibe going on for me. And you're like, that's good.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather be bald than balding, I guess. So,
yeah. That's a good look. All right. Well, so you got to come back on. We'll talk some more. For now, that's going to have to do it. This has been Parker's Pensées, and as always, all glory to God.